Three survival horror games, three blonde teenage protagonists, three legacies of being underrated, overpriced, and hard to find, all on PS2. Welcome to week 2 of Pliktober, and today we're going to talk about my most favorite game within this series. So welcome to week 2, week 3. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've been having a really hard time keeping up a schedule for uploading, but still, for all intents and purposes, welcome to week 2 of Pliktober, and today we are going to be talking about Haunting Ground. Haunting Ground was released in 2005 by Capcom. Some of the notable names were Noboru Sugimura, who was the writer, which, if you watched my Resident Evil 4 development series, you'll recognize that name as being one of the initial writers for the drafts of Resident Evil 4, further showcasing how Haunting Ground is actually just a manifestation of Resident Evil 4's second draft. But if you want to hear more about that, please look into that series. I believe I called it 3 of a Kind. I'll link the first episode down below. Kazuhiro Tsuchiya was the director, Jun Takahashi was the programmer, and Koji Nakajima was the producer. The idea of survival horror with a female lead was a core concept from the beginning, which again is something that we saw before when we were talking about Team Silent and their whole idea of the story with Heather. And we will continue to see this when we start talking about Rule of Rose. Haunting Ground utilized the PS2's internal sounds for OST. This made the game's adaptive music possible. You see, in Haunting Ground, unlike most games at the time, there aren't set OSTs that play one specific way at a specific moment. Instead, you have dynamic OSTs that are associated with your pursuers. If your pursuer is far away, the music will be quieter and slower. If the pursuer is very close to you, the music will get louder and quicker. This is something you wouldn't really see as a common practice until more so down the line past to PS4 really, because on PS3 I can't really think of many examples with adaptive music. However, I think PS4, I think Nier Automata, and a couple other artsy indie games that do this kind of stuff. The way the PS2's internal sounds were utilized actually saved a lot of space and effort when producing the game and had a good chunk to do with how good the game looked. You didn't have to load as many files that were as big for the sound design, so you could focus more on graphical fidelity. Reception was mixed. Critics didn't like Huey and thought the game was poorly paced. Comparing it to 2002's Clock Tower entry really sullied people's outlook on the game. But before I start clapping back at those critics, I'm gonna explain a little bit about the game to you. Now, the basic premise is that you're playing as Fiona Belli, who is a college student on vacation with her parents in the European countryside. Now, after a terrible accident happens involving a car crash, Fiona wakes up in this mysterious castle and is pursued by deeply disturbing enemies that want something from her that she doesn't really understand. With the help of a dog that she rescues, a white German shepherd, Fiona and her new companion Huey must fight off the pursuers, hide from the pursuers, all while solving puzzles and figuring out just what the hell is going on. The gameplay ties directly into the premise, Fiona and Huey having to work together. It doesn't matter if you're using Huey to fight off a pursuer while you run away, it doesn't matter if you're trying to solve a puzzle, and it doesn't matter if you're trying to do basic traversal around the castle. You and Huey need to cooperate, and that is going to be a key word here, cooperation. Huey doesn't feel like just something that you can tell what to do and it'll do it. He's not a weapon and he's not an item. He feels like his own thinking being. You have to build up a bond with Huey. You need to praise him when he does things right, and you need to scold him when he does things wrong. Failing to do this will make Huey very unresponsive and hard to work with. So building that good rapport with Huey early on in the game is crucial in making sure that you can fight off the enemies, solve those puzzles, and make your way through the game. Seriously, if you neglect Huey, that's a fast track to unlocking one of the worst endings I've ever seen in a game: scarring. The game utilizes the PS2 controller in a really interesting way. Since the cameras, well, they're not necessarily fixed, but they're like not in your control. I'm not sure what the exact, calling of that would be. Since the cameras are like that though, you don't really need the right stick to look around. So the right stick is dedicated to controlling Huey. You press up to make him search for something or attack. You can press down to make sure he follows you. You push the stick downward, like inwards into the controller to make him sit still. You can praise him by pressing right and scold him by pressing left. Everything else is just controlling Fiona. You have your basic interact with objects. You can craft certain objects in this kind of really optional. It's not really mandatory that you craft, healing items or basic combat or escape based items. I've pretty much gone through 5 playthroughs of this game, and I've never really put a lot of time or effort into the crafting mechanic. However, there are certain things that if you want to mess around with this, you could use these items, and there's a dedicated button for throwing. Fiona doesn't really have any attacks of her own, but she has this basic kind of kick animation that allows her to interact with the environment and, in certain scenarios, the enemies. Now, what makes the chase sequences so interesting is not just that you can hide and the camera will change and follow the enemy, or that you have dynamic music, but you have this thing called a panic meter. If Fiona is exposed to something bad, or if she takes damage, rather than having a health bar, the screen will start to blur and you'll get this filter over it that makes it very hard to see. Fiona will also become very unresponsive to your controls. So you're incentivized to really keep your distance or stay on your toes and hide, because direct conflict with the enemy will raise this panic meter, which will make just basic anything really hard to do, and once you're in a state of total panic is when the enemies can actually kill you. So it's a really interesting way to go about damage and consequence that really defies normal standards with health bars or regenerating health or that kind of thing. You don't really have enemies that you fight or have to get around. You have these small little things in the environment that can stop you, but for the majority of the game you'll have a level and a pursuer, and that pursuer is the only enemy coming after you. And while you might be like, oh, doesn't that get boring? No, it doesn't. The cat and mouse chase is pretty freaking great. And again, because the game isn't trying to load a million different things at once, it looks really good. Like Silent Hill 3, this could be a very early PS3 game. And one thing Haunting Ground has over both Rule of Rose and Silent Hill 3 and a lot of other games of its time, and even games on the PS3, is that there's no loading screens. You open a door, you walk through it, you're in an entirely new area. When I first did this, my mind was blown. So Haunting Ground is a beast of a game on the PS2 because it knows where to hold back to do what it wants to do. It's a very focused project, and because of that, the quality can truly shine in ways that PS2 games and hell, even PS3 games normally don't shine. And of course, you have replayability and unlockables. There's 4 different endings. There's, I think, 5 costumes for Fiona. There's 2 other costumes to unlock for Huey. There's an entire other game mode where you play as Huey. You can unlock concept art. You can unlock certain cutscenes. If you play in the dynamic levels, there's certain situations that don't have to happen. You could play through the entire game and not get a certain cutscene. So there's tons of stuff to unlock, there's tons of stuff to re-experience on a new playthrough, there's an unlockable hard mode, there's so much to keep you coming back. Basically, Silent Hill 3 had the weapons and the wacky stuff. Haunting Ground has wacky stuff, has costumes, but then entire other game modes and entire other ways to play. So in terms of bonus content, this is one of the greatest games I have ever played for unlocking and replayability. I cannot stress that enough.
Where the wrath of the gods be gone!
Let's start getting into a little bit of analysis. So the first question is it scary? Is it scary in the sense of Silent Hill, where it's like genuine horror? No. No, it's not. There's nothing in this game that made me like genuinely terrified when I turned the console off. It has an aura of foreboding and creepiness and the thrills when you have a pursuer coming after you. Like, I audibly gasped on multiple occasions, and the game has made me jump out of my own skin. However, it's more of a thriller than it is horror. And for some people, this might be a good thing. For some people, this might be a bad thing. You decide what that means for you. Is it fun? Again, like I said before, even the unlockables aside, the base gameplay of this game is freaking amazing. Bonding with Huey, running away from the enemies, solving puzzles, it all has this flow to it. Now, there's one level in the game where the pacing and the enemy design just is absolutely terrible. But aside from this one level, the game, I would say, is very close to being perfectly paced. You never feel bored, you never feel like there's not enough save points for when you need a rest, and you never feel like you're forcing yourself through something aside from that one section. So for the most part, yeah, Haunting Ground is really fun. Again, I've played through this game about 5 times now. Now, does it have like those like horror vibes that you'll see like in like lo-fi Silent Hill mixes and that kind of stuff? Not really. Not really like the lo-fi sort of thing, but like if you like that Capcom kind of like castle vibe that you see in Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 1. I know it's a mansion, but come on, like that's basically a castle setup. If you like that big, creepy house kind of vibe from those kind of horror games, or those kind of games in general, like the first Devil May Cry as well, then yeah, it has those kind of vibes, but it's not going to be like the kind of, resurgence of the music from these kind of games, or a Silent Hill 2 edit. It's not going to have those kind of liminal kind of vibes. There's a level towards the end that starts contorting reality and that kind of stuff, and that's a vibe in of itself, but it's not the vibes you're probably thinking of when I say old horror game vibes. Now, the next question is it replayable? I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, yes, it is replayable. You buy this, you'll be able to play it over and over and over. Okay? And then the most important question, is it worth the price? Now, I bought just the CD for about $700, including tax. For me, this was worth it because I saw a video about Haunting Ground, and from the moment I saw it, I knew it was something special to me. I knew that this was going to be a game that I would love, and lo and behold, I did. However, for a lot of people, that's a ridiculous price, and I don't blame you. However, there has been kind of like reprints, I guess you could say. I'm not sure exactly what the name is, but like repackaging of Haunting Ground that you can buy for about like $100 that I've seen. Because like a lot of people or a lot of companies are taking note of like the wave of nostalgia with PS2. So you're getting a lot of, older games being re-released. So you can find Haunting Ground for not too much. And for about $100, I'd say, yeah, that's absolutely worth it. But if you want to get it for even cheaper, what you can do is, if you have a Japanese PSN account on a PlayStation 3, you can buy Haunting Ground digitally for pretty cheap there. And then of course you can emulate it on PC, but I've seen a lot of like visual glitches and that sort of thing. So if you're not bothered by a lack of technical performance, then go ahead and play it on PC. But if you want to experience Haunting Ground as the polished masterclass game that it is, then I'd say either do PS3 or PS2. And if you do PS2, try to look for one of those repackaged that are around $100, because let's be honest here, $700, like...
Forget it. This is way too gross. Who would even think of doing something so disgusting?
Now, in conclusion, my favorite parts about this game are the unlockables, the, base gameplay. The narrative is also really interesting. I don't want to talk too much about the reveals and stuff, but there is a whole little mystery to unpack with this game. I love almost everything about it. Again, if I were to talk about everything I love about Haunting Ground, this video would probably be 30 minutes. But again, the best way I can describe it is that there's only one section I don't like, and that section isn't a roadblock. It's not going to be like Resident Evil 3 on PlayStation 1, where every, 15 minutes there's a section that takes you a year to get past. Haunting Ground, even at its worst, is playable. There are no soft blocks. I'm recording this a little bit later and there's a lot of noise outside, so forgive me if you hear that, but first off, disclaimer, there is going to be a major spoiler for something that happens towards the end of the game. So if you want to skip, 30 seconds ahead, you should do that now. I'll put like a timestamp or something, or yeah, I'll put up on the screen what point that I stopped talking about the spoiler, but yeah, here we go. There is one soft locky bit towards the end of the game where you're running away from one of the game's antagonists that can one-shot kill you down this linear corridor, and this statue falls on top of you. Now, people do not really know what you have to do here. It's a quick time event without any button prompts. Some people say press right, some people say, oh, twirl the sticks around, and some people say just mash every single button. I've tried all of these different techniques. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So it can be very infuriating and frustrating. So make sure you make a save file right before this happens. In fact, just generally save often, because it is pretty easy to die in this game, and it does boot you back to the main menu when you do. But yeah, right at the very end, the final 10 minutes of this game, there is a weird soft locky bit, but it can be brute forced through. It's just a matter of luck. So if you're willing to be patient and try this out 5 times in a row, you'll probably get past it. So yeah, that is worth mentioning. Alright, back to the video. So yeah, this has been technically week 2 of Pliktober, where we've seen yet another game that has this intense legend around it. It's super hard to find due to, commercial sale issues and some controversy over the game. On that note, if I'll put a little bit of a disclaimer, this game deals with some really dark sexual themes, and while for the most part it handles that tastefully, there are, some unlockable outfits and that sort of thing that lean towards the gratuitous sex appeal, which was standard for, Y2K era games. So if you're bothered by that kind of stuff, you might want to try to avoid Haunting Ground, but if you're not, again, I wholeheartedly endorse and recommend this game however you're able to play it. For all the games that have these insane legacies, for all the 3 games we're going to be talking about this Pliktober, this is my favorite. I'm not going to wait till the end of the series to reveal that. This is the one I really think is worth the legend, the crazy ordeals you have to go through to play it. This is that game. This is that PS2 game that's super legendary and hard to find, but is totally worth it when you play it. Anyways, this has been Pliskin. Over and out.
This is Solid Snake. Hey, subscribe to Pliskin Boy. God damn it.
You heard him.